Hello, folks. My name is Dylan Wild. I'm an attorney at Wild Law Offices in Spearfish, South Dakota, and I am making this video to give you my take on the O.J. Simpson parole hearing that occurred just 2 days ago on July 20th, 2017. As I'm sure you heard by now, O.J. was granted parole at that hearing, and he's going to be set for release probably sometime in October. I believe the first date he'd be able to get out is October 1st. You know, but I'm making this video for a couple reasons. One, I guess my life really isn't that interesting. And two, I enjoy sports immensely, and I actually chose law as my profession. So when the two combined, it's kind of a bonus. So in kind of looking at this, it was kind of interesting. They combined that with the fact that, hey, I remember the white Bronco chase back in was it June 17th of '94, and then obviously the trial of the century that led to that guilty or not guilty verdict, which basically shocked the nation. I know a large majority of the people today that have taken and been polled, believe that he is or was guilty of the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, but the jury on his criminal trial found otherwise. And this isn't related to that trial. Obviously, it's related to his uh, break-in of a not really a break-in, but an armed robbery at the hotel, uh, the Palace Station Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, on September 13th of or was it 08, 2008. He's been in jail for 9 years now. So it stems back to a separate incident, and unless you actually take the time to look at and watch the parole hearing, you're missing out on some pretty interesting stuff here. I mean, if you have nothing going on this weekend, you might as well pop the popcorn and sit down and take this in, because it is actually fairly entertaining. This parole board hearing there is was led by Connie Bisbee, who is the Nevada parole board commission chairman. And it kind of started off with her going through some different facts that kind of set the basis as a starting point for the parole hearing. And you could tell right away that it was going to be a little bit interesting. One of her first statements, indicated that alcohol, uh, Mr. Simpson, O.J. Simpson, has been given an assessment as having alcohol issues, dependency problems. And she explained that that stemmed from the fact that he admitted, at the time of the trial, that alcohol was a factor in the crime that occurred, that he had been drinking that day. And when this was coming out, you could just see the bewilderment on Simpson's face. He was not wanting to agree to that at all. But as Miss Bisbee finished with her, initial facts, despite you could tell he did not want to agree with it, but he, said, yes, that's all correct. Those facts are true, which, I mean, is really, as an attorney, that's what you'd want him to do. Like, hey, look, you served 9 years for an armed robbery where no one was injured. You didn't even have the gun. Just sit here, just shake your head, yes, hat in hand, be remorseful, and get out of here, go on with life. And right away when he's just acting in shock of what the actual chairman is stating as far as facts, yeah, you kind of had that indication early on that there could be some fireworks here, and that proved to be the case when OJ was initially questioned by one of the board members. Tell us, explain to us, what was your thought? What was your thought process? What were you thinking at that time? Rather than saying, I wasn't thinking. I'm sorry. I was in emotional state. There's property here that was mine, and I was just trying to, get it back. I was just kind of, thoughtless and just not thinking, and it was wrong. I mean, he actually goes in and he starts defending himself. He's like trying to try this case again in front of the parole board. I mean, Rather than, like I said, hat in hand, here he goes trying to defend himself. And, Simpson starts off with, well, I went in there and they were friends of mine. The two alleged victims here, they're friends of mine. And I went in there to get property that was mine. And he explained about this California case where it was determined that a large majority, I believe, of that property that was in question was actually his. Uh, but, he's basically then is explaining that, so now I'm here trying to get paroled because I was convicted of going in and stealing my own property, which, I mean, is significantly minimizing and downplaying, what actually occurred. But then he takes it even farther in saying that, well, and I didn't even know that a gun was brandished at the time that, we were in there. It wasn't until later on because this person that pulled out the gun was behind me, so I never even saw it. And I was kind of ignoring the fact that he, basically brought in these bodyguards that he knew had concealed weapon permits and were going to be carrying weapons, and basically ordered them to line up and block the doorway to make sure that no one could get out, so that he could get his stuff and get out. But in any event, it really started off with OJ just getting that sense that there's going to be some fireworks here. I mean, he really did his best to sabotage, his own case, his own chance of getting paroled and getting out of jail. And uh, probably one of the best lines that came out of soon after this line of questioning, and like I said, OJ said that there were these friends, his friends were here, and he goes, this was his statement. No one has ever accused me of pulling any weapon on them. And as an attorney, I mean, if I was sitting there, I'd be like, oh, wow, okay, well, that's good, because nothing you said is true, because, Nicole and Ronald, I mean, they're dead, so they didn't actually tell or accuse you of actually, pulling a knife on them. So far, everything you're saying is true. But I'd be hitting him, giving him one of these, like, okay, shut up, just be remorseful. Remember, let's move on with this. Then of course OJ takes it a step farther and says, and Bruce, referring to Bruce Fromong, who is one of the victims in this thing, he knows me. He knows I would never do that. I never have. And at that point, as his attorney, you just have to be sitting there like, oh man, just shut up, just shut up. You don't want them to feel like you're not being anything but contrite, that you're lying. Just stop. And fortunately, then the subject did change, for a while. So we'll be coming back to this, but and it kind of took an interesting change where the next commissioner brought up the parole hearing that occurred back in 2013. And at that parole hearing, Simpson stated that he was going to complete the commitment to change program that was offered there in the jail facility. And of course, then he also stated that he was going to attend AA meetings while in the facility. And of course, he had to admit that he did not complete those. He did not do that. And the best was the explanation. I mean, he didn't have time. You're in jail. I mean, that's what you have is time. That's all you have. But OJ, and this is in comical fashion, which maybe he's getting this from his, the Naked Gun movies that he starred in, or co-starred in. Basically, he admitted that he completed the Alternative to Violence program. So then he got to explain that he would help mediate disputes between other inmates and other groups. So just take a second to soak that in. You have O.J. Simpson actually mediating and trying to diffuse potential violence between inmates in the correctional facility. And groups, having disputes in that facility. I mean, just fascinating. But then it gets even better, because then the next thing that was keeping him so busy was the fact that he is the commissioner of the 18-team softball league that's in the prison. So the duties of mediating between, trying to resolve violence between inmates and groups within the facility, as well as organizing and making sure that the rules are adequately and correctly enforced in the 18-team softball correctional facility league. Just made it too much of a burden, too much of a time drain in order for him to actually attend AA classes and complete the commitment to change program that he indicated he would complete back in 2013 at his last parole hearing. Yeah, this hearing was, I mean, it was something else. And one of the things that didn't quite notice it right away, but when turned to the next board member that was asking questions. His name was actually Adam Endel. And Mr. Endel, apparently, as he's getting dressed that morning, decided that it would be completely appropriate to wear a Kansas City Chiefs tie. So he's wearing a suit, or sports coat, and he actually has a Kansas City Chiefs tie. And I'm sitting here thinking, what message is he, trying to send? I mean, obviously, OJ, one of the greatest running backs in NFL history. While he didn't play for the Kansas City Chiefs, he did play for, the Buffalo Bills and 49ers. But, is he saying that, hey, I'm not a fan of OJ because I'm a Chiefs fan and the Bills, played the Chiefs in the American League and conference play, and or hey, I am a football fan. It just seems to me that if you're going to try to be, and appear to be impartial, not have any questions of impropriety, and really just be professional. When you wake up that morning, I'm going to be, hearing the parole, governing over, sitting over, presiding over the parole hearing of one of the greatest football players to play the game. You might decide not to wear a tie or really any article of clothing that is, indicating some sort of a preference or a loyalty or, enjoyment in football, and basically preventing any thoughts or appearance of impropriety whatsoever. But I mean, that's kind of the way that this entire thing was conducted. I mean, there was just laughter. It was jovial. I mean, there was banter back and forth between the board members and OJ, and it was really quite bizarre. And again, I mean, pop the popcorn and throw that throw it on. I'll put a link to it with this video. I mean, it was really something else. But it was during this correspondence with Mr. Endel where OJ was asked, do you have concerns? Because when you're on parole, there's going to be some very significant requirements and restrictions. And if you violate, I mean, you can be brought back here and be serving time again. And it was at this point where OJ said, I'm not a guy that lived a criminal life. I'm a pretty straight shooter. And again, just wow. Wow. I mean, to make statements like that, I'm not a guy that lived a criminal life and a straight shooter. As the attorney for OJ, you'd have to be like, please, man, just stop. Because if this board feels at all that you are lying, not being honest, your shot is done. I mean, and you have a good shot of getting paroled here, and all you're doing is shooting yourself. And especially considering the only time that the 95 acquittal was brought up, the trial and the ultimate acquittal, was when one of the board members, basically, grabbed a stack full of papers and said, we literally have hundreds and hundreds of letters, both in favor of granting parole and in opposition. And the ones in opposition of granting parole, they all bring up the 95 acquittal. And basically, saying that you should be serving time now because you got away with double murder. And they made it clear that, hey, we're not going to be considering that acquittal in our decision here. But at the same time, I mean, showing a little bit of contriteness and not, honesty, and not just blatantly lying would probably help his cause a little bit. And OJ probably would have been best if he had just had his daughter, Arnell Simpson, who actually got up and spoke on his behalf, basically just talked the entire time. I mean, because she was short, she was brief, and basically was, he's not perfect, and he truly is remorseful, and that would have been perfect and great had OJ actually come across as truly remorseful. And again, if he had just let his daughter sit there and do the talking for him, it would have been perfect, and exactly what any attorney would have wanted, and what would have been in OJ's best interest. But honestly, he just couldn't help himself. So that kind of brings me to OJ's attorney. Look, if you're representing OJ Simpson, we're coming up on a parole hearing. I mean, you're going to be spending some time with him. Basically preparing him for what's coming up. And granted, this isn't his first time. There's a 2013 parole hearing, but he wasn't eligible for parole on all of the charges that he was convicted of. So that's why they're here again just 2 days ago. But you kind of have an idea of what he is like, and you just have to be hammering into his head, hey, this is how you're going to conduct yourself. I'm sorry. It was wrong. I wasn't thinking. I've learned so much from this. I'm a different person. I mean, just on and on and on of this is, when you're answering questions, this is what you need to be keeping in mind, because your goal is to get out of there, not to upset them and end up having to serve another couple more years. But OJ's attorney, when it comes to his part of the closing, he's trying to find this letter, a letter that OJ wrote that is the one and only document that he refers to. And, obviously it's hugely important. I mean, OJ wrote it, and we all know how great of an author OJ is. If you read any of his book of If I Did It, you can tell he's a great wordsmith, just a great author. So this letter was apparently just a huge thing. And of course, the attorney's dropping documents on the floor and picking them up, and he's turning to OJ, do you have it? I mean, he can't find it. Well, fortunately, he does find it, and quite honestly, once he found it and was reading from it and giving his statements, Mr. Laverne, excuse me, Malcolm Laverne, he really did an excellent job. He did a good job once he got settled in and then started going. So, but I think that perhaps there could have been a little better preparation of OJ of how to, respond to questions, and preparing him for questions, and practicing some responses. But, and also, I mean, you have one document. I mean, that's the only document you referred to. This is the only document you need. I think you'd have it right, in hand almost the entire time. So for him not to be able to find that right away and then start knocking stuff on the floor, kind of added to the three-ring circus that was this parole hearing. But again, once he found it and he got going, he did a very good job. Then we got to one of the victims. One of the victims, Beardsley, he had passed away about a year and a half ago. But obviously Mr. Laverne was able to talk about conversations that he had had with Beardsley, and how him and OJ had, basically made amends, and, prior to his death, and things were good. But then we had Fromong, Bruce Fromong, the other victim present at the parole hearing, who got up and, basically, gave statements in favor of OJ's parole. And it was absolutely, that got to extent where it was just bizarre. For example, the last line that he made was, if OJ calls me tomorrow and he tells me that, hey, they approved it, I'm getting out, I need a ride, can you come get me, can you come and pick me up? Fromong actually turns to OJ and he says, I'll be there for you, buddy. I'll be there for you. It was comical. I mean, it was just absolutely kind of just extremely odd, and just unbelievable how it all went down. At that point, the board then breaks for them to go and look at things and determine how they're going to vote when they come back in and cast their votes. And The best part, I was watching the was it NBC, kind of live, or recording of their live, presentation of this parole hearing, and they had Christopher Darden as a side commentator during this break. And if you remember Christopher Darden, he was the assistant state's attorney that was basically second chair of this case with Marcia Clark. And of course, if you recall, it was actually Christopher Darden that is the one that asked Judge Ito to have OJ try on the glove, which of course did not fit, which led to Cochran's mantra through the remainder of that trial: if the glove doesn't quit, or if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. And of course, Christopher Darden did not live that down. And Marcia Clark, if you've watched any of the documentaries on that OJ trial, Marcia Clark was just absolutely irate that Darden basically let Johnny Cochran, bait him into getting Ito to make OJ try on the glove. And, Darden fell for it, and there's a large part of it, of that acquittal, that rests on the fact that, Darden made that decision contrary to Marcia Clark's desire to have OJ try on that glove. And when it didn't fit, Cochran took that and stressed to the jury that they must acquit, and they did. And Darden, of course, at that point was going off just about what BS the entire proceeding was, with kind of the laughing back and forth. He did pick up on that statement about I've never been accused of pulling a weapon on anybody. And he goes, well, yeah, that's because the two people that you pulled a weapon on are dead. They couldn't accuse you of it. But you can tell that Christopher Darden is still very much disturbed and bothered by the fact that OJ was actually acquitted of those charges, and I think that he knows and has had to live with the fact that a lot of that rests on his decision to try to make him try on that glove. In any event, when the panel came back, basically OJ needed a four out of six individuals or board members of that parole board to vote in favor of parole. There was only 4 present at that hearing, and all 4 of them did vote yes. Had one of them voted no, then there would have been some telephonic conference, or the decision would have been delayed in order to get the vote of another, to get to the 4th vote, or the 6th person to get to that 4th vote. But all 4 voted yes. That basically assures that he's going to be released, and it's going to be sometime in October. He is going to try to get permission to serve his remainder of his period on parole in Florida, which more than likely is going to occur. Again, the first date that he would be eligible to actually be released from prison would be October 1st, but with some of the different things that need to occur between now and then, with getting it set up for him to actually serve his parole, for the remainder of his parole period in Florida, that getting that in place, getting all the requirements put together, it'll probably be sometime in October. And so there you go. It was interesting, to say the least. If you have really an uninteresting life, if you find sports and the law interesting, and if you were at all fascinated by the trial of the century, you won't be disappointed by pressing play and sitting back and enjoying this, because it was really quite interesting to see this right away, where it just appeared that OJ was going to shoot himself in the foot, and then it went into comic relief at that point. So if you're bored, take a look.